Maya Johnson walked into the big glass building at exactly 8:30 in the morning, just like she did every day. But today felt different. Today was the day that could change everything for her company. She carried her leather briefcase and wore her best navy blue suit, the one she'd bought after getting her first promotion 2 years ago. The elevator took her up to the 42nd floor, and she could see the whole city spread out below through the huge windows. Maya had worked really hard to get here. She remembered being a little girl in her grandmother's small apartment, dreaming about working in a place like this. Now, at 26 years old, she was one of the youngest people to ever reach her position at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Walking down the hallway, Maya nodded to her coworkers. Some smiled back, others just looked busy with their phones. She'd gotten used to being different here. In a company of 200 people, she could count on one hand how many looked like her. But Maya had learned to focus on her work instead of worrying about fitting in. Her office was small but had a nice view. She'd decorated it with her law degree from Howard University and a photo of her parents on graduation day. They had worked double shifts at the factory to pay for her education, and she thought about them every time she felt like giving up. At 9:15, Maya's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Whitmore's assistant. Emergency meeting in conference room A. Please bring contract analysis materials. This is the big one. Maya's heart started beating faster. She knew what the big one meant. For months, everyone had been talking about the possible deal with Nexus Corp, the huge technology company. If they signed this contract, it would be worth $50 million, more money than their company had ever seen before. She grabbed her files and headed to conference room A. This was the fancy meeting room they only used for the most important clients. It had a long wooden table that could seat 20 people, and the walls were covered with awards the company had won over the years. When Maya walked in, she saw all the big bosses were already there. Mr. Whitmore, the company owner, was standing at the head of the table looking excited. He was in his 50s with gray hair and always wore expensive suits. Next to him sat the other senior managers, all men who'd been with the company for many years. Maya, perfect timing, Mr. Whitmore said with a big smile. I want you here, because you're the best contract reader we have. Today we're going to look at the final agreement with Nexus Corp. Maya took her seat at the table. She felt proud that Mr. Whitmore had called her the best, but she also felt nervous. She was the youngest person in the room by at least 15 years, and definitely the only woman. Everyone was looking at her like they expected something special. Whitmore started talking about how amazing this deal would be. Folks, this is it. This contract will triple our income for the next year. We'll be able to hire more people, give everyone raises, and maybe even open that second office we've been talking about. The other executives started getting excited. They talked about buying new cars and taking expensive vacations. One man said he might finally be able to send his kids to private school. Another joked about buying a boat. Maya listened to all this talk, but something in her stomach felt wrong. In her 3 years working here, she'd learned that when deals sounded too good to be true, they usually were. Her grandmother always said, "Baby, if someone's giving away diamonds, you better check if they're real first." The assistant came in with a stack of papers, the actual contract. It was thick, maybe 50 pages long. Maya watched as the other people in the room barely looked at it. They were too busy celebrating to read the details. But Maya had always been careful about details. In law school, her professors taught her that contracts were like puzzles. Every word mattered, every sentence had a purpose. And sometimes the most dangerous parts were hidden in the middle where people didn't expect them. She opened her copy of the contract and started reading from the beginning. The first few pages looked normal. Names, dates, basic agreement terms. But Maya knew the real important stuff usually came later. While the men around the table kept talking about their bonus money, Maya worked through each page carefully. She took notes in her small notebook, the same one she'd used since college. Her pen moved across the paper as she wrote down anything that seemed unusual. Page 10, page 15, page 20. Everything looked fine so far. But Maya had learned to be patient. Bad contract language was like a snake hiding in tall grass. You had to look carefully to see it. Around page 30, something caught her eye. There was a section labeled Performance Standards and Termination Rights. Maya read it once, then read it again. Then she felt that sick feeling in her stomach get stronger. The language was confusing on purpose, written in a way that made it hard to understand. But Maya's legal training helped her see what it really meant. And what it meant was trouble. She looked up at Mr. Whitmore, who was now talking about buying new computers for the whole office. She looked at the other executives who were laughing and planning their success party. None of them had any idea what she'd just discovered. Maya's hands started to shake a little as she read the section one more time. She wanted to be wrong. She hoped she was wrong. But 3 years of reading contracts had taught her to trust her instincts, and her instincts were screaming that something was very, very wrong with this deal. She thought about her parents working, those long hours at the factory. She thought about her co-workers who were counting on this deal to pay their bills. She thought about her own career, and how speaking up might hurt her chances of getting promoted again. But she also thought about what would happen to everyone if she stayed quiet and let the company sign a bad contract. Maya had always been taught to do the right thing, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. She took a deep breath and prepared to say the words that would change everything. Maya's heart was beating so fast she was sure everyone could hear it. She looked around the conference room at all the happy faces, then back down at the contract in front of her. The words on page 30 seemed to jump off the paper like they were on fire. She read the section again, slowly this time. Performance Standards and Termination Rights. It sounded boring and official, but Maya knew that boring sections were often where companies hid their worst tricks. Her law professor had always said, "The devil wears a business suit and hides in the fine print." While Mr. Whitmore kept talking about how rich they were all going to be, Maya grabbed her yellow highlighter and started marking the important parts. The first thing that caught her attention was a phrase buried deep in the paragraph. Client may terminate this agreement within 6 months if performance benchmarks are not met to client's reasonable satisfaction. Maya stopped and read that line 5 times. Client's reasonable satisfaction. Those 3 words made her stomach drop. In contract language, this meant Nexus Corp could decide they weren't happy for any reason at all. They didn't need proof. They didn't need to explain. They just had to say they weren't satisfied. But it got worse. Maya kept reading and found another section that made her feel sick. If Nexus decided to end the contract early, Pinnacle Marketing would have to pay them back for all their expenses. Not just some expenses, all of them. Office rent, employee salaries, travel costs, even coffee and donuts for meetings. Maya did some quick math in her head. If they worked for Nexus for 6 months and then got fired, they wouldn't just lose the $50 million. They might have to pay Nexus back another $10 or $15 million on top of that. It would be like working for free for 6 months, then having to pay your boss for the privilege. She looked up at her co-workers again. Mr. Patterson, the finance guy, was showing everyone pictures of the new car he wanted to buy. Mr. Chen from marketing was talking about finally taking his family to Disney World. Mr. Rodriguez was planning to propose to his girlfriend with the bonus money he was expecting. None of them knew they might all be out of jobs in 6 months. Maya flipped through more pages, hoping she was wrong. Maybe there was another section that explained things better. Maybe she was misunderstanding the legal language, but the more she read, the worse it got. She found a section about performance benchmarks that made her hands shake. The contract said Nexus could judge their work based on market standards and industry best practices, but it never said what those standards were. It was like being told you had to pass a test without being told what would be on it. Maya had seen contracts like this before, back when she was in law school. Her professor had shown the class examples of what he called trap contracts, agreements that looked good on the surface but were designed to cheat one side. She remembered thinking at the time that no one would be stupid enough to sign something like that. Now she was looking at one in real life, and her own company was about to sign it. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her mom. "Hope you're big. Meeting goes well today, sweetheart. Dad and I are so proud of you." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Her parents had worked so hard to give her opportunities they never had. They trusted her to use her education to help people, not to stay quiet when she saw something wrong. She thought about all her co-workers who had families to feed. Jenny in accounting had 3 kids and was always worried about money. Old Mr. Williams in maintenance was planning to retire next year. Lisa in reception had just bought her first house and was still paying off student loans. If Maya was right about this contract, all of these people could lose their jobs. The company could go bankrupt, and it would all happen because she didn't have the courage to speak up. Maya looked at the clock on the wall. The meeting had been going on for 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Mr. Whitmore was now talking about hiring more people and expanding to new cities. Everyone was laughing and making jokes about being rich, but Maya wasn't laughing. She was reading every word of that contract, looking for any way she might be wrong. She found sections about intellectual property that would give Nexus ownership of all their creative work. She found clauses about confidentiality that would prevent Pinnacle from even talking about why the contract ended. It was like a perfect trap, designed by lawyers who knew exactly how to take advantage of smaller companies. Maya imagined the Nexus executives sitting in their fancy offices laughing about how easy it was to trick people into signing these agreements. She thought about calling her old law professor for advice, but there wasn't time. She thought about asking to take the contract home to study it more carefully, but she knew Mr. Whitmore wouldn't wait. He wanted to sign today. Maya realized she had 2 choices. She could stay quiet, hope for the best, and watch her company possibly fall into a trap. Or she could speak up right now in front of all these important people and tell them they were about to make a huge mistake. The second choice could ruin her career. These executives might think she was just a young person who didn't understand business. They might get angry at her for ruining their celebration. They might even fire her for causing trouble. But if she chose the first option and stayed quiet, she would have to live with herself knowing she could have prevented a disaster. Maya looked at the contract one more time. The words seemed to be mocking her, daring her to do something about it. She thought about her grandmother, who always said, "Baby, sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing, but it's still the right thing." She closed the contract and took a deep breath. Around her, the celebration continued. Mr. Whitmore was talking about the signing ceremony tomorrow, where reporters would take pictures and everyone would shake hands. Maya knew that if she didn't speak up now, tomorrow would be too late. Once that contract was signed, there would be no going back. She had to find the courage to save her company, even if it meant risking everything she had worked for. Her hands stopped shaking. Her heart was still beating fast, but now it was beating with determination instead of fear. Maya Johnson was about to do the hardest thing she had ever done in her life. Maya's voice cut through the happy chatter like a knife through butter. "Excuse me," she said, and suddenly the whole room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at her with surprised faces. Mr. Whitmore had been in the middle of telling a joke about buying a bigger office building. His smile froze on his face like someone had pressed a pause button. "What is it, Maya?" he asked, and she could hear a little irritation in his voice. Maya's mouth felt dry, but she forced herself to speak clearly. "This clause is a trap," she said, holding up the contract. "We can't sign this." The silence in the room was so complete that Maya could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. She looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked confused, others looked annoyed, and a few looked like they thought she had lost her mind. Mr. Whitmore's smile completely disappeared now. His face turned red, and Maya could see a vein starting to show on his forehead. "What are you talking about, Maya? Our legal team already approved this contract. Everything is fine." Maya stood up slowly, her legs feeling a little shaky. She had never challenged her boss in front of so many important people before. But she knew she couldn't back down now. "Sir, with respect, I don't think the legal team understood what this section really means." She opened the contract to page 30 and held it up so everyone could see. "This part here gives Nexus Corp the right to fire us within 6 months for any reason they want. They don't have to prove we did anything wrong. They just have to say they're not happy with our work." Mr. Patterson, the finance director, leaned forward in his chair. He was a big man with a gray beard who had been with the company for 15 years. "Maya, Every contract has termination clauses. That's normal business practice. Yes, sir, Maya replied, but this one is different. Look at this part right here. She pointed to another section of the contract. If they fire us, we have to pay them back for all their expenses. Not just our fees, their expenses too. That could be millions of dollars. The room started to buzz with whispers. Maya could see that some people were starting to look worried, but others still seemed angry that she was ruining their celebration. Mr. Chen from marketing crossed his arms and looked at Maya like she was a child who didn't understand grown-up things. Maya, you're being paranoid. Nexus Corp is a respected company. They wouldn't try to cheat us. This is just standard legal language. Maya felt her cheeks getting hot, but she kept her voice calm and professional. I understand why it seems that way, sir. But I've been studying this contract for the past hour and I'm seeing a pattern that worries me. She walked over to the big whiteboard at the front of the room and picked up a marker. With shaky hands, she started drawing a timeline. Here's how I think this could work, she said. They hire us for 6 months. We do all the work, create their marketing campaigns, design their websites, plan their advertising. We spend our own money on employees, equipment, and resources. Maya drew arrows and boxes on the board as she talked. Then at the end of 6 months, they say our work doesn't meet their standards. They fire us using this clause here. We don't get paid the $50 million. And we have to pay them back for their office rent, their employee salaries, and all their other costs during those 6 months. The room was dead quiet now. Maya could see that her timeline was starting to make sense to some people, but others still looked skeptical. Mr. Rodriguez, who had been planning to propose to his girlfriend, spoke up. But Maya, why would a big company like Nexus want to do that? They have plenty of money already. Maya turned back to face the room. This was the hardest part to explain. Because free work is still valuable, even to rich companies. If they can get 6 months of professional marketing services without paying for it, that's like getting millions of dollars for free. And if they do this with several companies every year. She didn't finish the sentence, but she could see understanding starting to dawn on some faces around the table. Mr. Whitmore stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Maya, this is ridiculous. You're seeing conspiracies where none exist. Nexus Corp contacted us because they heard about our good work. They want to partner with us, not cheat us. Maya felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. She could apologize right now, sit down, and hope everyone forgot about this. She could keep her job and avoid making enemies. But she also knew that if she backed down, her company might be destroyed in 6 months. Mr. Whitmore, she said quietly, I hope you're right. I really do. But what if you're wrong? What if I'm seeing this correctly? Can we afford to take that risk? The CEO's face was getting redder by the minute. Maya, I've been in business for 25 years. I know how to read people. The Nexus executives I met with were honest, straightforward businessmen. They're not trying to trick us. Maya nodded respectfully. I'm sure they seemed very nice, sir. But con artists are usually very charming. That's how they get people to trust them. The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya realized she had just called the Nexus executives con artists in front of her boss and all the senior managers. She might have just ended her career with one sentence. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat loudly. Maya, even if you're right about this clause, which I'm not saying you are, we've already shaken hands on this deal. The Nexus people are flying in tomorrow morning for the signing ceremony. We can't back out now. Maya looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. Some looked angry, some looked worried, and some just looked tired. She realized that these people didn't want to hear what she was saying, because it meant giving up their dreams of big bonuses and company success. But Maya also realized something else. She was the only person in this room who had actually read the entire contract carefully. She was the only one who had the legal training to understand what the complicated language really meant. And she might be the only one who cared more about protecting the company than about looking good in front of important clients. Sir, Maya said, her voice getting stronger, I know this is difficult. I know everyone was excited about this deal. But my job is to protect this company's interests, and I can't do that if I stay quiet about what I've found. Mr. Whitmore stared at her for a long moment. Maya could see him thinking, weighing his options. She knew he was probably wondering if he should fire her right now for causing trouble or listen to what she had to say. Finally, he spoke. "Maya, you better be absolutely certain about this. Because if you're wrong, you're not just ruining this deal. You're ruining relationships that took months to build." Maya took a deep breath. "I am certain, sir, and I can prove it." Maya opened her laptop with hands that were surprisingly steady now. The anger and doubt from the other people in the room felt like waves crashing against a rock, but she had found her strength. She knew she was right, and she was going to prove. "Give me just 2 minutes," Maya said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I spent last night researching Nexus Corp, and what I found will shock you." Mr. Whitmore looked at his expensive watch and sighed loudly. "Maya, we don't have time for this. The signing ceremony is tomorrow morning. There are reporters coming, photographers, even some people from the business magazine. We can't cancel." Now, but Maya was already pulling up her research on the big screen at the front of the room. The first thing that appeared was a newspaper headline from 6 months ago. "Local marketing firm closes after failed partnership." "This is Bright Ideas Marketing," Maya said, pointing to the screen. "They were a company just like ours. Same size, same type of work. 6 months ago, they signed a contract with Nexus Corp that looked almost identical to ours." She clicked to the next slide, which showed another headline. "Creative Solutions Agency lays off 80% of staff." Then another. "Dynamic advertising files for bankruptcy protection." The room was getting very quiet now. Maya could see that some of the executives were starting to pay attention, but others still looked angry and impatient. Mr. Chen shook his head and made a dismissive sound. "Maya, companies go out of business all the time. That doesn't mean Nexus Corp is doing anything wrong. Maybe these companies just weren't good enough." Maya had expected this response. She clicked to her next slide, which showed a timeline with 4 different companies. "That's what I thought at first too, sir. But look at this pattern. All 4 of these companies signed contracts with Nexus Corp. All 4 contracts were terminated after exactly 6 months. All 4 companies either went bankrupt or had to fire most of their employees." She let that information sink in for a moment before continuing. "And here's the really interesting part. In each case, Nexus Corp claimed the companies didn't meet their performance standards, but none of these companies had ever had performance problems with their other clients." Mr. Patterson leaned forward, suddenly looking much more interested. "How do you know all this, Maya? This isn't the kind of information you can just find on Google." Maya smiled for the first time since the meeting started. "You're right, sir. I had to do some real detective work. I called my friend Jenny, who works at a law firm downtown. She helped me get in touch with people who used to work at these companies." She clicked to her next slide, which showed quotes from former employees. Maya had spent hours on the phone the night before, talking to people who had lived through exactly what she was afraid would happen to her own company. This is what Tom Anderson, former CEO of Bright Ideas Marketing, told me. Maya read from the screen. He said, "The contract looked great at first. Nexus promised us the moon and stars, but after 5 months of hard work, they started complaining about everything. Our designs weren't creative enough. Our campaigns weren't reaching the right people. Nothing we did was good enough. Then boom, they fired us and demanded we pay back their expenses." Maya could see that the mood in the room was starting to change. The celebrating had stopped completely now, and several executives were looking genuinely worried. But Mr. Whitmore wasn't giving up easily. His face was still red, and Maya could tell he was getting more frustrated by the minute. "Maya, even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying it is, we're not those other companies. We're better than they were. We won't have performance problems." Maya had hoped someone would say exactly that. She clicked to her final slide, which showed the actual contract language that Nexus had used with the other companies. "Mr. Whitmore, here's the contract language that Bright Ideas Marketing signed, and here's the language in our contract." She highlighted both sections on the screen. They were almost word for word identical. "The problem isn't whether we're good enough," Maya explained. "The problem is that these performance standards are designed to be impossible to meet. Look at this phrase here. Campaigns must achieve market penetration consistent with industry leaders. That sounds reasonable, right? But what it really means is that our campaigns have to perform as well as the very best campaigns ever created by companies with 10 times our budget. Maya walked closer to the screen and pointed to another section. And this part says our work must maintain consistent brand messaging across all demographics. But Nexus Corp has customers all over the world, speaking different languages, with completely different cultures. No marketing campaign can appeal to everyone equally. It's literally impossible. The room was dead silent now. Maya could see understanding starting to dawn on several faces around the table. Mr. Rodriguez, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, finally spoke up. So you're saying that no matter how good our work is, they can always find a reason to say it doesn't meet their standards? Exactly, Maya replied. And once they do that, they can terminate the contract and demand we pay back all their expenses. It's like playing a game where the other person gets to change the rules whenever they're losing. Mr. Patterson pulled out his calculator and started pressing buttons. After a few moments, he looked up with a pale face. If we work for 6 months and then have to pay back their expenses, we could lose $15 to $20 million. That would bankrupt us. Maya nodded sadly. And that's exactly what happened to those other companies. They thought they were getting the deal of a lifetime, but they were actually walking into a trap. Mr. Whitmore sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time since Maya had known him, he looked old and tired. Maya, if what you're saying is true, then we're in serious trouble. We've already spent money preparing for this contract. We've hired new people, rented extra office space, bought new equipment. I know, sir, Maya said gently. And I'm sorry to be the one bringing this news. I wish I was wrong about all of this. But I'd rather disappoint everyone today than watch our company get destroyed 6 months from now. She could see that most of the executives were starting to believe her, but she also knew they were feeling trapped. They had made promises to their families about bonus money. They had made commitments to clients based on the expected income from this deal. Backing out now would be embarrassing and expensive. Mr. Chen looked around the table at his colleagues, then back at Maya. So what do you think we should do? The Nexus people will be here tomorrow morning. We can't just tell them we changed our minds. Maya had been thinking about this question all night. She knew that proving the problem existed was only half the battle. She also needed to have a solution ready. We renegotiate, she said simply. We tell Nexus that our legal team found some issues with the contract language, and we need to make some changes before we can sign. Mr. Whitmore looked skeptical. And what if they refuse? What if they say take it or leave it? Maya met his eyes directly. Then we leave it, sir, because a bad deal is worse than no deal at all. Maya looked around the conference room at all the worried faces staring back at her. The excitement from an hour ago had completely disappeared, replaced by fear and uncertainty. She knew this was the most important moment of her career, maybe even her life. Mr. Whitmore rubbed his temples like he had a bad headache. Maya, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're telling me that we should risk losing a $50 million deal because you think Nexus Corp is trying to cheat us? Yes, sir, Maya replied without hesitation. Because losing this deal is better than losing our entire company. The room fell silent again. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She thought about all the nights she had stayed late at the office, all the weekends she had worked, all the dreams she had about building a successful career. Everything could end right here if she was wrong, but she wasn't wrong. She was absolutely certain of that now. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. Maya, assuming you're right about all this, what exactly do you propose we do? We can't just call Nexus and tell them we don't trust them. Maya had spent the entire night thinking about this exact question. She walked back to the whiteboard and picked up the marker again. We negotiate. We tell them our legal team found some issues that need to be fixed before we can sign. She started writing on the board as she talked. First, we demand that all performance standards be clearly defined with specific, measurable goals. No more vague language about reasonable satisfaction or industry standards. Mr. Chen leaned forward. What kind of specific goals? Maya had done her homework on this too. Things like increase website traffic by 15% or generate 500 new leads per month. Numbers that can be measured and proven, not opinions about whether something is good enough. She wrote another point on the board. Second, we remove the expense reimbursement clause completely. If they want to fire us, fine, but they can't make us pay their bills. Mr. Rodriguez looked confused. Won't they think that's strange? Why would we suddenly want to change the contract? Maya smiled. Because we tell them the truth. We say our legal team is being extra careful because this is such a big deal for our company. Any reasonable business would understand that. She added a third point to her list. And finally, we add a penalty clause that works both ways. If they fire us without good cause, they pay us a penalty. If we quit without good cause, we pay them a penalty. That makes it fair for everyone. Mr. Whitmore stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Maya could see him thinking, weighing all his options. After what felt like forever, he turned back to face the room. And what if Nexus says no to all these changes? He asked. What if they tell us to take the original contract or walk away? This was the hardest question of all, and Maya knew her answer might determine whether she still had a job tomorrow. She took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. Then we walk away, sir. Because our company's reputation and our employees' livelihoods are worth more than any single contract, no matter how big it is. The silence that followed was so intense that Maya could hear the traffic noise from the street far below. She watched, Mr. Whitmore's face trying to read his expression. Was he angry? Disappointed? Ready to fire her? Finally, Mr. Patterson spoke up. You know what? Maya's right. I've been doing the math in my head, and if this deal goes bad the way she's describing, we could lose everything, our building, our equipment, maybe even our homes. Mr. Chen nodded slowly. I hate to admit it, but those other companies Maya researched, they probably thought they were getting great deals too. Right up until the moment they got fired. One by one, the other executives started agreeing. Maya watched in amazement as the same people who had been angry at her an hour ago began supporting her position. Mr. Whitmore walked back to the table and sat down. He looked tired, but also somehow relieved. Okay, Maya. We'll do it your way. We'll call Nexus and tell them. We need to renegotiate some terms. Maya felt like she might cry from relief, but she kept her voice professional. Thank you, sir. I know this isn't easy, but I really believe it's the right thing to do. The next 3 weeks were the most stressful of Maya's life. The Nexus executives were not happy about the proposed changes. They argued, they complained, they even threatened to walk away from the deal completely. But Maya had prepared for this too. She had researched Nexus Corp's financial situation and discovered they needed this partnership just as much as Pinnacle did. They were facing pressure from their own investors to show growth in their marketing budget. During one particularly difficult phone call, the Nexus CEO actually hung up on Mr. Whitmore. For a moment, everyone thought the deal was dead. But 2 days later, Nexus called back with a counteroffer. They agreed to most of Maya's proposed changes. The performance standards were made specific and measurable. The expense reimbursement clause was removed. The only thing they wouldn't agree to was the mutual penalty clause, but Maya decided that was acceptable. The final contract was for $30 million instead of $50 million, but it was a fair deal that both sides could live with. More importantly, it was a deal that wouldn't destroy Pinnacle marketing if things went wrong. 6 months later, Maya was sitting in a different conference room, this time as the newly promoted Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. She was the youngest person ever to hold that position, and the first woman of any age. Mr. Whitmore stood at the front of the room, addressing the entire company at their quarterly meeting. I want to tell you all a story, he began. 6 months ago, we almost made the biggest mistake in our company's history. We almost signed a contract that could have destroyed everything we've built. He looked directly at Maya. But one person in this room had the courage to speak up, even when it meant challenging people with more experience and authority. That person saved our jobs, our company, and our future. The applause that followed was thunderous. Maya felt tears in her eyes as her co-workers stood up and cheered. Her parents were there too, having driven in from the suburbs to see their daughter get recognized. After the meeting, Maya walked back to her new office. It was twice as big as her old one, with an even better view of the city. On her desk was a framed photo of her law school graduation, and next to it was a new edition, a business magazine with her picture on the cover and the headline, "Young Leader Saves Company with Contract Courage." But the thing Maya was most proud of wasn't the promotion or the magazine cover. It was the email she had received that morning from Tom Anderson, the former CEO of Bright Ideas Marketing. He had read about her story in the business news and wanted to thank her. "Your courage to speak up probably saved other companies from falling into the same trap we did," he wrote. "You're a hero to people you'll never even meet." Maya looked out her office window at the busy street below. Somewhere down there were other young professionals facing their own difficult decisions. She hoped that when their moment came, they would have the courage to do what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard.